Hello and welcome to episode 246 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is June 12th, and together with Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So since the announcements from SAP about SAP IDM, a lot of customers have already started their journey to move to Entra ID. We've had several customers talking about their experience and also hosted several hands-on sessions. Martin Raepple is a key player in most of these discussions, and today we want to show in more detail how the journey is evolving. Today, he shows us how to integrate Microsoft Entra ID with SAP Cloud Identity Services and leveraging Entra's advanced features to migrate and modernize existing SAP IDM workflows using self-service UIs, integration with SAP data sources, and much more. Welcome back, Martin, to our show. As always, start maybe with a quick introduction, what you do at Microsoft, and then, I'm looking forward to getting the latest on this new integration.
Latest and greatest. Yeah, thanks, Holger. Thanks, Goran, for having me again here on the show. Always a pleasure. Martin Raepple. I'm with Microsoft now for almost 5.5 years. In my most recent role, I'm taking care from an engineering side to take care for our customer SAP in many areas. But one of the most important ones that I'm also taking care for quite some time now is the whole identity and access management collaboration that we do with SAP. I'm actually in this business for quite a long time, but but since actually also from both sides, since I joined Microsoft from SAP, specifically this collaboration intensified quite heavily when last year, 2024, in February at the Technology Days of DSAG, the announcement was made that SAP Identity Management will go end of life, and SAP chose Entra as their recommended path to migrate SAP IDM customers to. Yeah, and since then, quite a lot of activity happened. We had quite an intense and still are ongoing an intense collaboration with the DSAG to guide customers and partners for helping joint customers on the migration journeys. I'm also closely collaborating with our engineering teams and the SAP engineering teams to take care for the development work that needs to be done on both sides. So that's more or less what I do in this context. But yeah, always a pleasure.
Perfect.
Right, let me maybe share my screen.
Yeah, sounds good.
And maybe start with I actually already set some context. So from that perspective, we can quickly go over the first slide here. Again, that's what I just mentioned. We had this announcement for end of life of SAP Identity Management, IDM, last year. Since then, as I said, a lot of activity happened. One of these work streams that we jointly do is certainly also on enhancing our current documentation. We have a great migration guide under this short URL shown here on that slide on migration guidance for several scenarios. And in the course of this scenario-driven guidance, I also developed some hands-on sessions and also published some blog posts that I will talk about in a minute that also focus really on hands-on experience on specific scenarios. And that actually also the reason why we do this recording or this episode today, because I want to share again one, I think, quite interesting and hopefully appealing scenario to most of the SAP IDM customers. We had in episode 203, if I remember correctly, a general overview of the overall journey and program for SAP IDM migration to Entra, where my colleagues Mark Wall and from the SAP side Chris and then others joined, and so I think we gave quite a good overview. So for those who are not familiar with this program between SAP and Microsoft, you may want to look at this episode 203. Another artifact of the collaboration is this reference architecture that shows on a still quite high level how we envision integration or migration from SAP IDM to Entra. And as you can see, in the center of this architecture is more on the left-hand side is certainly Microsoft Entra, which not only consists of the traditional directory or Entra ID tenant. Certainly, this also contains a lot of more components, such as, for example, Entra ID governance, which is another key component in Microsoft Entra, and that we will take a very close look in today's session. Certainly, we also have many connectors in Entra in the context of SAP. Definitely one of the most important ones is the connector to SuccessFactors. So whenever you have the need to integrate with SuccessFactors, you don't have to develop that from scratch. You can use a pre-built and quite rich connector to SuccessFactors, certainly also to other HR systems, but SuccessFactors is one of the most prominent connectors in this space. When it comes to integrating with the SAP applications, no matter if it's traditional on-prem systems or a traditional ERP system deployed on as an SAP RISE offering, or other LOB solutions such as Concur, Cloud Solutions, etc. Those integrate, or the reference architecture gives us here the guidance to integrate those solutions with Cloud Identity Services. And the interface between Entra and Cloud Identity Services is actually also part of our, that already existed even before the collaboration on Cloud Identity on SAP IDM migration was announced. So we already had good working integration. However, that is enhanced now and further, or we provide jointly further development on both sides to improve the integration between Entra and Cloud Identity Services for provisioning and federation. A completely new functionality has been introduced with Identity Access Governance in 2024. And most recently, just a month ago, we also announced extending the scope to GRC access control. So whenever you want to avoid any sort of media breaks by, for example, doing compliance and risk checks before you actually assign, for example, a user to a certain role and permission, and you want to check, for example, some SOD checks, you can do so from within Entra and basically integrate with Identity Access Governance or GRC Access Control to do such checks before you actually provision the user. That's one of the key scenarios here. Okay.
One just, if you can go back, what I noticed. You have also on the slide below Active Directory synchronization to Microsoft Entra. Many customers are using Active Directory, meaning as there is a synchronization, the whole identity will then work out of the box in all those end-to-end scenarios, right? Just to emphasize.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I can't even think so far of a customer, of a joint SAP Microsoft customer who had not yet fully migrated to a cloud-only identity management in Entra. I think all of them honestly still run, and I think that will still be the case for the next years to come in a hybrid mode. Yeah, exactly. Where Active Directory still is in place and where it's serving quite a number of on-prem solutions, and specifically for SAP customers, right? I mean, Active Directory remains quite an important component due to the fact that it is capable of issuing Kerberos tickets, which are used quite heavily by many SAP customers to implement single sign-on with SAP GUI, for example. Correct. Right. Yeah. All right. Then we had episode 2026, where I started in your show to take basically from starting again from the reference architecture, but then one level deeper into a specific scenario that makes use of all of the components that we just saw in the reference architecture, and that showed how to do user provisioning in such a hybrid environment. So we had in this scenario an Entra ID tenant, where we also already made use of Entra ID governance for the entitlement management with access packages, which basically represent business roles in that is mainly known to the SAP IDM customers. And then we made sure that a user who has been approved or to be assigned to such an access package got properly synchronized or provisioned via Cloud Identity Services and the Identity Provisioning Service into a backend system that was connected via the Cloud Connector and the connectivity service in BTP to the Identity Provisioning Service. Right, and already there we made use of the SCIM connector, and again the functionality of this SCIM connector is currently being improved heavily, so that we can also in the future make sure that full coverage of authorizations and mapping to roles in a backend system is taken care of. There's a blog post. I included also the link here that gives you really step-by-step guidance. If you are interested in such a scenario, and most customers are, then that blog post here gives you detailed guidance. Okay, so now for the scenario today. It looks a little bit similar from a setup perspective. However, a few components have been added, as you can see here. And the main intention of today's scenario is to show you how you can customize typical access governance workflows. So those workflows where, like in the previous scenario, where a user applies access or requests access to an access package using a self-service portal, this My Access portal, and where an approver needs to approve that. However, by talking to many SAP IDM customers, I heard quite often the requirement that the determination of the right approver in such a workflow typically depends on business-related context, such as, for example, which cost center the user is assigned to in SAP, or which plant the user maybe is assigned to, or which company code the user is requesting a role or an access to in a backend system. So quite often this business context drives determination of the approver. And the standard functionality in Entra ID governance to determine the approver in such workflows is there is already some, or you can already implement certainly such approval stages. Up to 3 are possible, but you can basically say like, okay, the manager of the user that requested access should be the approver, or a specific user that you define, or even a group of users should be capable of approving such a request access, but definitely not such context information like, for example, a cost center or a company code as an example. This information, and many SAP IDM customers do so, typically is maintained in a backend system. So somewhere in a custom table, typically that resides here in the backend system, where there is a mapping between, for example, cost center or a company code to an approver's identity. For example, like an email address of the user. That is authorized to approve access to certain roles and groups within a specific cost center area or company code, etc. Now, the question is, how does this information get into the process of determining here the right approver in such a workflow? So basically here the approach is that we will make use of SAP technology, BTP technology, namely the integration suite, which serves ideally in such a scenario to implement such integration flows and integration logic. And that certainly, again, makes use, like we did in the previous scenario, of the connectivity service to build a secure connection from integration suite via the Cloud Connector to call an OData service that exposes the data from this custom table in the backend. In addition to that, I'm using today in this episode a public preview of a new feature, a relatively new feature that has been added to Entra ID governance recently, and that allows us to break out in the process of determining the approver in such an access governance workflow and make use of a custom built logic that is implemented as an Azure logic app to exactly do what we need to do here. So to break out in that process, so when the user has requested access, to find out who is the right approver, that logic app, first of all, takes or requests access to Business Technology Platform by requesting an access token from BTP, and then calls the integration suite endpoint to then trigger that OData call and returns back the address of the email address.
So basically you have full flexibility to do or to define whatever integration you would like to have. Right?
Absolutely. You could do basically anything you want to do in this logic app, right? I mean, I've been also asked that question a few times, like, okay, so what should be done in that logic app? What should be done in such a scenario in integration suite? I would probably follow here the guidance that in integration suite, you may want to do, if needed, any sort of data transformation into a format that is really then suitable for the logic app to consume. So whatever data that OData service returns, in which format and which fields, you may not want to, for example, return all of the fields exposed by this OData service, because it might also be used in other scenarios. But here again, out of the probably many fields that are exposed by this OData service, the only thing that really is of interest is actually the ID of the user that should act in such scenario as the approver, right? Then I would probably in the integration suite in the iFlow filter for only that specific field, return that to the logic app, and then return that back to Entra ID governance process to the workflow that's pending here until the logic app returns that data, right? Certainly what also needs to be taken care in the logic app, but I think I have a slide. Okay, maybe I jumped quickly to my last slide before we take a look at the scenario. This is again the same picture, again one little level deeper. So here you see a breakdown of the main task in that logic app. Yeah, so I called it dynamic approver because what it does is it dynamically determines the approver in such scenario, right? So the main steps here are like, so the first step is when it gets invoked by the process here to find it, it needs to request a token from BTP. It does so simply by querying the token endpoint from the Access UAA or the Authorization and Trust Management Service in BTP. Therefore, it needs a OAuth client ID and secret that it can obtain from a service key exposed by integration suite. Then it actually calls with that token. It is now authorized then to call the iFlow that uses the connectivity service and a destination to call the Cloud Connector. And then what it returns here is an email address of a user known in Entra ID. However, the interface between that logic app and Entra ID governance requires that we do not return an email address, but the object ID of the user in the Entra ID tenant. Therefore, we have to have this third step here, which basically calls the Microsoft Graph API to retrieve or to retrieve the object ID from Entra ID for a given email address of a user. And with that, the response is then sent back to Entra ID governance, and the workflow continues, and the approver should see the request from that user, the right approver, yeah, the approver that's maintained here in the backend in that custom table, exposed as a service binding with the latest and greatest SAP ABAP tooling for OData. And by the way, I used here the Eclipse tooling to expose an OData version 4 service. Wonderful experience, I have to say. Really, I mean, it was honestly for me, I so far only did V2 ODatas, but now with V4, everything got so much simpler. And the tooling in Eclipse is wonderful. So everyone who had not done this, I just can recommend to.
So with ADT, with the ABAP development tools.
ADT tooling, yes. Right. ABAP developer tools, and with the what is it called? The RESTful development model in ABAP. Wonderful, yeah. Really great experience. So kudos to the SAP colleagues who work on this. Yeah. All right. Yeah, actually, with that, so this again just summarizes what the focus of this scenario mainly is, and I think which again. I think where many SAP IDM customers are today, and where they think about how do I migrate those artifacts to Entra, such as self-service UIs. Yeah, again, we have the capabilities in Entra to fully customize those self-service UIs without the need to develop completely new applications. I will show you in a second that on an access package, you can easily define for example, the entry fields that are required for an access request to an access package, how you can customize those, etc. Then certainly the full flexibility with logic apps to customize those workflows. By the way, the same concept with logic app applies also to lifecycle workflows such as mover, leaver, joiner workflows, right? So when you connect with an HR system, you typically have those scenarios like, new employees join the organization, existing employees may leave or move to other. So again, here also typically you have the need to maybe integrate with external systems in order to retrieve some data before you can do such a joiner, leaver, mover scenario. And again, the same applies here as well for customization. Logic apps are key here to implement such customization. Right? Okay.
Great. Yes. Yeah.
So with that, let me then take a look, or let us take a look, and following my numbering scheme, let us start here with the access package. So let's take a look at the access package and how the policy is configured here before we then continue to take a closer look at the logic app. So I am logged in already to my, okay, let me refresh my session. Okay, I should probably log in with a different user. Okay, and since this is a very highly privileged access, I need to confirm on my mobile.
Very good.
That I am truly the user who claims to log in here. So, okay, let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, so we are already in, so here we are in the Entra Admin Center, which is the place to go for any Entra-related administration. We have Entra Governance here in the left side menu, and under Entitlement Management, we basically see all of the entities that we can administrate for such a scenario. First and foremost, let's take a look at the access package that we are going to use in this scenario. So what we do is we will request, the user will request access to as an SAP developer in the company, in our fictitious company, that should allow the user finally to access the BTP Business Application Studio to develop applications on BTP, right? So we don't have, like in the last session, an on-prem scenario. It's a cloud only in this case. Right, so let's take a look at this access package. And access packages typically have one of the key components of an access package is the policy. The policy in an access package defines all the aspects of, for example, how approval how approval should work. It could also be automatically approved, like you request as a user access to a certain access package, and if it's like a low level access, or so not a highly privileged access, but very common scenarios like whatever, like for example, a basic email access, for example, right? Then you could also auto-approve that. But in this case, and let us quickly look at this here, we have an approval stage that says, okay, the value is determined with a custom extension. Yeah, okay. And that's exactly what we want to do. Yeah, the logic app, exactly. Yeah. And certainly we also have in an access package the underlying so you basically here, I'm here in the edit mode of this access package. Here you see that as a first approver, the name of our logic app is written here, and that instructs Entra ID governance to call out to that logic app that is used here to determine the approver. Okay, so and this tab here shows us which roles will be, or sorry, which groups will be assigned to the user if approval is successful. And we can see here that one specific group in Entra ID is assigned, which is the SAP BTP developer group. Yeah. And that information is finally then added to the access token that the user obtains when logging into Business Application Studio on BTP. Then BTP forwards the authentication requests using IIS and SAML proxying, or actually OIDC proxying, to Entra. Entra puts that information of the user, so the group assignment, into the token, which then finally leads to assigning the user to a corresponding a role collection in BTP, so that's shown here, right? That then allows the user to access the Business Application Studio in this example, right? Okay, let's jump to the dynamic approver logic app, and that logic app can be seen. So again, if we go to catalog, so access packages can be and any sort of extensions can be also further grouped for governance reasons into so-called catalogs. They are just a container for, like, for example, those access packages. By default, there's a general catalog that exists, but you can also define your own. But also custom extensions are scoped by catalogs. And here you see the two custom extensions or logic apps that we use in this scenario, the one that determines the approver, and the last one here, the send teams notification that sends out to the SOC team the information. So if we click on that link, we get directly to the designer of the logic app. And let me quickly jump into the designer mode here so that we can see the different steps. And for those who are familiar, and I think Goran, Holger, you had quite a number of Power Platform sessions in the past, right? So I think most of your regular attendees here on the show will probably know.
Familiar.
They are familiar with that, right? So there are quite a number of steps. Some of them are just there because you need to parse then some JSON data that's returned, etc., etc. But maybe just to give you an idea, like one of the most important ones, like this one, for example, this one requests the access token from BTP. And here you see so I'm using, by the way, a trial account. You can do this also yourself at home if you have a trial account on BTP. There's nothing that prevents you also from implementing this with such a scenario with Integration Suite. Yeah. I'm getting here the client ID and the client secret from the service key of the BTP, right? Then I certainly need to pass the response, extract the token. Then finally, with the extract token, I can call, as you can see here, with the authorization header and the bearer token, the endpoint of the Integration Suite endpoint, right? That exposes a iFlow that I called find approver or data. When we get back with the information about the user, as I said before, what we get back from the process is an email address. So only the email address is stored in the backend system in that table. So we need to find out, quite simple here with a graph call. So we have to basically provide here the email address from Integration Suite, and what we get back in return is the ID, the internal ID, the object ID of the user. And that is then finally constructed here in a response that follows a documented data structure that
to return it to Entra.
To return it, right. And here you can see that we pass the ID of the user here in that primary approver structure, right? And that's what we return. Return back to Entra ID governance. Okay, with that, I think, let me check what we want to take a quick look next. I think we can maybe jump here quickly to the Integration Suite. So I think that's also not a... Okay, I think I have the link somewhere here. Let's quickly go to my trial account.
And so, yeah, exactly. So you call the integration, the iFlow on BTP. The iFlow makes then the connection to the OData service.
Right.
And then you return the result to the logic apps, and the logic apps then in the final step returns the information back to
exactly
the Entra ID configuration with this dynamic flow that you had.
Exactly.
Access package.
Exactly. And as I said, you all you need is really, for such a scenario, all you need is a trial account.
Nice. Yeah.
Certainly, it only works on Singapore landscape. No, just kidding. Only Azure. But let me go quickly to my instances. So here I created a trial instance of the Integration Suite, and if I go to the application, there's also quite a very good tutorial on the SAP side okay, I'm already propagated here to my okay, let me see if that works, because I changed a little bit the IS configuration here. Okay, maybe then because as I said, I'm proxying any authentication requests to BTP applications to my but that user hasn't yet assigned to the role collections. Okay, anyways, it's not so super interesting. I mean, it's a very simple iFlow that as I said, that basically makes use of the
data service.
Exactly. Exactly. So not really a big deal. But let me continue. Okay, let's take a quick look. But again, I think it's also not that unusual. So on the Cloud Connector side, right? So we are here now on basically on the side where the whole on-premise systems run. Administrator. And we have configured here the connection as an on-prem connection to, okay, I was already a little bit late here. So, oops.
Seems to work.
Yeah. Okay. So let me choose my trial account here. And as you can see here, I have a cloud to on-prem connectivity set up that exposes a few URL paths that are required for such scenario to basically invoke the OData v4 service here. And with that, it's quite straightforward. Let us quickly double check here. So system is reachable. Now I'm running this here as again, something that you can easily do yourself at home. I'm running the Docker image for the ABAP system. Yeah, that's quite useful and handful to just run a simple ABAP system that is perfectly sufficient here for this setup. Okay, and with that, I think we can go through the scenario almost. Right, now we start with step 5. Let's now run the actual scenario. First, as the test user, Tina Test, who is requesting access to this access package. And let's see if we can successfully find the right approver. Using the before mentioned integration with the integration suite and the logic app. And in order for Tina Test to access the My Access portal and request access to this package, we can copy this URL from the Entra Admin Center. And let me open a new incognito window so that we have a fresh session and paste the URL to the My Access portal. Okay, so let's log in as our test user, test@bestrun.microsoft.com. All right. So this is the self-service portal that is a built-in functionality in Entra ID governance to manage as a self-service your personal access to the different access packages. So as we can see, as we copy-pasted this link, we directly are invoking a request to create a new request for the SAP Developer Access package. If we click on continue, we see the input parameters that are required by the user to enter. Those are configured on the policy of the access package, and you can freely define all sorts of type of information and the format that the user has to provide. So as an example, since we request a developer role, I would like to ask the user which platform the developer role is intended to be requested, which programming language maybe, etc., etc. So let's choose Java. And now comes the point where the business context of the user is set, which is key to find out the right approval for the given business context. So I chose company code. Let's assume we are in a enterprise environment with different subsidiaries maybe maintained in SAP, and each subsidiary has its own company code. So let's say we have different approvers for these different company codes, and one of them is DE07. And we will take right after that a quick look in the custom table in the backend system, in the SAP system, to see how this information is chosen or is used to find out the approver's identity. So let's submit the request. So now we can see that the request has been submitted, and now in the process, due to the policy of this request package, the right approver needs to approve first before Tina Test gets access as a BTP developer in this scenario. So let's take first a look at the custom table. So here I'm in the Eclipse ABAP development tools. I have logged into my backend system, and here I can see under database tables the custom table that I use for the scenario. And if I just run that table or a query on that table, I basically see the content of that table, and let's check out the parameters that we just entered as user Tina Test. So I think we chose as a platform type SAP BTP. So there's only, for test purposes, only BTP maintained, but with different programming languages. So we chose BTP, Java, and as a company code DE07. So this means that John Doe at Best Run Corp on Microsoft.com is the intended approver for this scenario. Right? So let's see if John Doe has been determined also by our custom business logic with the dynamic approver logic app. So let's go back to the Entra Admin Center. We are already here in our dynamic approver app. Let's see on the run history if we see a successful run. Okay, so we have now, so it's 11. So this run was like a minute ago, and we can see now that there has been a successful run happened. Let us quickly check what we entered here. So maybe we can directly jump to the task where the OData service is called from the logic app to integration services on the BTP side. So here we can see the parsed parameters that we entered right now in the request from Tina Test, right? And let's also see how the response look like. Okay, so the response from the service is an XML structured response from Integration Suite. And as we can see here, as an approver email, the data from the custom table has been returned, right? So so as I mentioned before, we have to return not the email address of the user to Entra ID governance in order to route this request to the right approver. So we have to provide the object ID of the user in the Entra ID tenant for successful routing of the approval to that user. For that reason, we do almost at the end of our dynamic approver logic app a call to the Graph API with exactly that email address and get back the ID and display name. But the important piece of this information is the internal ID of that user, which is then finally constructed in the response to Entra the ID governance, as we can see here, right? So this ID has now been set in this return structure or return data structure that is expected by Entra ID governance for continuing this request successfully. So now this means if we now log into the MyAccess portal as user John Doe, we should see a new request for approval. Let's see. All right, let's log out from the Access portal as from the MyAccess portal as Tina Test and log in as John Doe.
Yep.
Okay, so we see...
Oh, there's one request pending. Yeah, perfect.
Right, so we see one request pending. Let's see who that request created. Yeah, it's Tina Test, and she asked for the SAP developer package. Let's approve. with that, we can go back maybe for a minute to the Entra admin center and see. So once again, if we go to let me go back to the access package and how it has been defined. If we go to access packages and the developer package, we see that as resources, she should now be a member of this group, of the BTP, SAP BTP developer group. Let's do a quick check here. And see if Tina Test is a member of this group. Right, now she is.
Yes.
That means that now this group, and please, okay, it's a little bit probably hard to remember this ID, but now being a member of this SAP BTP developer group allows Tina Test now to log in to the BTP Business Application Developer Studio, because she also, and let me go back to the BTP sub-account, because in the role collections of my BTP sub-account, where an instance of the Business Application Studio is available, we can see that the Business Application Studio developer role collection has a mapping to exactly this object ID that we just saw in the admin center. So, and let me also just for completeness show you that for a second. So if we go to just that you fully understand the end-to-end scenario, under application registrations, we see that there is our BTP. Oh, there's quite a lot of SAP Cloud Identity Services tenants, but I think that, let me just double check which one. I think this one may be the right one. Or is it this one?
Yeah, the other one is expired, apparently.
Okay, the other, that's true. Okay, so anyways, for the application registration of the Cloud Identity Services tenant of my BTP sub-account, I configured the token configuration in a way that it issues any sort or any group memberships of the user in the token. And that allows finally BTP to automatically map this business role or this role collection and the contained roles in that role collection to the user who signed in with the Entra ID tenant. Okay, so let's go to the Business Application Studio and see if user Tina Test can successfully log in with Entra and has access to Business Application Studio. So let's do another private window. So this is the URL of the Application Studio on BTP. Now first of all, it redirects to the Cloud Identity Services tenant, which is configured to use as a corporate identity provider, our Entra ID tenant. So that's why we don't see a login from Cloud Identity Services, but we are directly redirected to the Entra ID tenant. So here I can log in with Tina Test. Run corp, yes, this one.
Now, because she's part of the group and the group is mapped to...
Exactly.
Okay,
let's
terms and conditions.
See, nice information, but now, okay, so we are logged into Business. Otherwise, you would have seen an unauthorized access. Yeah, so because to see this start page or this landing page of the Business Application Studio, membership of this SAP Business Application Studio developer role collection is required. Yeah. Okay. So maybe we can also now quickly see if we have also a Teams notification received, because let me just double check, or let me show you again the setup of the access package. So if we go into the policies again and just open that for a second. Right, so we see that under custom extensions, we have set up that for any request that has been approved, which has already happened by user John Doe, the custom extension send Teams notification will be invoked. So maybe let's go back to the catalog and see in the catalog how this extension looks like. It's pretty simple. So this send Teams notification essentially does one thing. It receives, but it just sends an adaptive card with the information received from Entra ID governance, such as the business package, the access package, the name of the user, etc. Yeah? So, and it sends it to a specific Teams channel that is accessible by our fictitious SOC team in our company. So maybe we can quickly invoke again maybe in an incognito window to see if we have if that has happened. So let me open
the Teams message. Yeah.
Yes, let's open Teams and log in to our tenant as the Teams user.
So basically, for the access package, we had these two logic apps defined. Basically,
exactly.
One was for the lookup in the SAP system to find the company code or look up the company code and then find the approver. Basically, that's then how the approval happened. And now, okay,
right. So basically, customizing the whole business logic in those Entra ID governance workflows has already been available since quite a long time using logic apps. What's basically new and still, by the way, in a public preview phase is using logic apps as a custom extension in those approval workflows.
Okay,
so this is a kind of still quite new feature. The feature that we use specifically here now for this for such things like hooking into the access package workflow for events such as when a request is created or approved or rejected, etc. So for all of those lifecycle events, extensibility using logic apps has already been there for quite some time. The new feature really is this approval determination or hooking into the approval workflow. And as said, talking to many SAP IDM customers in the last month, I found this being this contextual approver determination or kontextbasierte Berechtigerfindung in German is quite a very common use case specifically across many large corporations. That, for example, have like many subsidiaries that are maintained with different, plans or, different company codes where certainly organizationally different people are responsible as approvers in such access governance workflows. So I think for SAP customers, that's my guess here, and not only my guess, as I said, it has been quite confirmed by many talks and conversations I had. So let me see if we can log in as one of our SOC team users. So SAP Sentinel. I think let me copy password. So now as a SOC team member, I need to be informed timely about any sort of highly privileged changes to system access, such as developer access to
the business applications,
our SAP backend system, or not that, so to BTP in this case. Certainly not each and every access should shouldn't create a notification to the SOC team, but in this case, since it's a developer, or maybe in case of administration tasks or roles, such access should create a notification. So here we see the channel, the SAP IM events. That's the channel where this card has been sent to. And here we can see, okay, time also fits, right? So we see that card being sent. It's right. So it's user exactly Tina test. So the event was we added the user to that package, yeah. But we can certainly also, as I said before, hook with this functionality into other events, such as also removal or whatever it is. There are quite a number of possible events.
Nice.
Right. So, and with that, I think I was able to share with you some of the self-service UI customization and workflow customization features for or in Entra ID governance. And as I said, I think many SAP IDM customers make actually heavily use of the customization capabilities in SAP IDM these days. And now I got the question quite often. So what is possible in terms of customizing those workflows in Entra and in Entra ID governance? I mean, certainly you can't just copy paste your customizations from SAP IDM to Entra, because it's a completely different technology. In SAP IDM you have typically JavaScript code, or even down to the database, some stored procedures that implement those customized behaviors in SAP IDM workflows. And as shown in this session, in Entra, we have basically one common technology, which is logic apps.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, I guess a lot of customers have these tables somewhere maintained in an SAP system, some custom tables where they have exactly this logic that you showed us. I mean, in your case, it was very simple with BTP, with the org, but then with the email of the approver. So I guess a lot of customers have similar tables in their SAP system. And now they can basically follow your example with the logic app to connect to these tables, to do some logic in there, to retrieve the relevant information, and then just continue with the approval step.
Exactly.
Nice.
Last thing to mention, I also plan to write a blog post in this existing series of 2 parts already for such migration scenarios. So I hope I will finish that work latest by the end of this month, so that I can go to my summer break with having that task finished. All right, good.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Martin, for this end-to-end demo. I think it was really great to see all the different components involved. Obviously, Entra ID, logic apps, also integration suite, the backend, Cloud Connector, BTP. Really, really nice to see all of this working together.
Right.
Perfect. Great.
Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward for
always
the
a
next
pleasure.
episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.